The news just keeps on coming, and unfortunately these new bits of information might not mean very good things for the upcoming Jurassic World movie. David Leitch is now officially out of the running for director on the project, which leaves a very important gap in the creative team, and one that Universal Pictures are hoping to fill very soon. An insider has revealed new information about the David Leitch exit, including some conflict and drama behind the scenes. We've got all of that and more in this video. Welcome back to Jurassic Outpost. Thank you for joining us today. Let's get into it. Earlier this week, Deadpool 2 and John Wick director David Leitch was announced as being in talks to direct the upcoming Jurassic World sequel. The negotiations sounded as though they were going well, but they were short-lived, and earlier we reported that the studio and director had parted ways. The report told us insiders say the parting was amicable, but that ultimately the studio and Leitch had different visions for the film. This now becomes one of the hotter directing jobs in town, as the studio is sticking to its July 2nd, 2025 release date. An interesting move for the movie, but a welcome one for sure. The audience reaction to this news certainly wasn't very enthusiastic, and we wonder if that may have influenced this decision. An insider has revealed a bit of conflict between David Leitch's production team and Steven Spielberg's team, which supposedly led to the breakdown in their relationship. But before we get to that, a new report by The Hollywood Reporter's Heat Vision reveals even more about the exit of David Leitch from Jurassic World 4, and unfortunately it doesn't paint a very good picture about what comes next for the movie. Aaron Couch and Boris Kit tells us part of the problem is that Universal is so far along on the project that Leitch would essentially have been more of a shooter than someone who could have really put his stamp on the film. Some believed Universal and producers Frank Marshall and Pat Crowley were looking for a director for hire on this project, and that really does appear to be the case. But here comes possibly the worst bit. There's not enough time to work with new ideas, one source told us of the film, which has a script by David Koepp and an ambitious release date. According to another source, the producers have already done some dyno design work and soft prep on the movie. A lot to take in here, so let's break it down and then we'll give our thoughts, because despite this being news, we really don't want to hear about the next Jurassic World movie. There are some positives to look at here, and we'll get into them in a little bit. So let's break it down. There is not enough time to work with new ideas. It's clear that David Koepp's screenplay and whatever the story is, whatever they've come up with, it's clear that the studio are confident in those ideas. They're confident in what they've read from Koepp, so much so that they aren't looking for a director to come in and take a stab at the screenplay. This happened back in 2013/2014 with Colin Trevorrow and Jurassic World, for better or worse. The studio had a screenplay ready to go, written by the Apes writers Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, and when director Colin Trevorrow was hired, the studio allowed him and his writing partner Derek Connolly to redraft the script and delayed the movie 1 year to accommodate. This time round, however, the studio aren't budging on that 2025 release date, it seems. The producers have already done some dyno design work and soft prep on the movie. This could mean a multitude of things, but we know paleontology consultant Steve Brusatte is working on the new movie and has already consulted the current production team. They already have dinosaurs in mind, and we can imagine they have one specific new dinosaur in mind, the new big bad. But since the report says some dino design work, we hope the intent is more general and can be applied to the many species of dinos roaming in the wild after Jurassic World Dominion, living as animals in natural, or I guess semi-natural habitats, and acting less like monsters and aggressive towards each other. The soft prep could mean anything, but our best guess is that concept art has been happening for a good few months now, taking David Koepp's ideas to a visual reality and allowing the producers to hone in on their vision for director and take the required production steps to bring the project to life and meet that deadline. The article also tells us something interesting. It was going to lean into action territory. One source described it as having an Escape from New York vibe, but a Universal insider said that was not true. Well, what about the idea of weaponized dinosaurs? The insider said no. It's okay, we can all breathe a sigh of relief. I'm a little confused as to how Jurassic will mix well with an Escape from New York vibe, but I'm not mad at it. John Carpenter is a brilliant filmmaker, writer, and composer, and Escape from New York is no family movie. For those who haven't seen it, the synopsis reads, In 1997, a major war between the US and the Soviet Union is concluding, and the entire island of Manhattan has been converted into a giant maximum security prison. When Air Force One is hijacked and crashes into the island, the president is taken hostage by a group of inmates. A former Special Forces soldier turned criminal is recruited to retrieve the president in exchange for his own freedom. Now, I am suddenly reminded of the 2004 John Sayles Jurassic Park 4 screenplay, which dealt with hostages, terrorism, and had a very action-driven plot. While I don't think that suits Jurassic Escape from New York as inspiration, I'm intrigued. I can see certain elements making sense. I can see David Koepp making this work. So maybe the movie is set in a world or a part of the world where dinosaurs have taken over a large stretch of land, thus making it unlivable for humans, a rainforest or something like that. Maybe a team has to go in to rescue someone or something, and maybe it will feel more like a boots on the ground, Predator style movie. I mean, it could work, sneaking in, sneaking out, avoiding detection, avoiding certain death and confrontation with dinosaurs. We also can't help but be a little excited about a Jurassic script being compared to a script in which a plane crashes on an island.
Oh my God!
The article says, a Universal insider says it was not true, so this one of course remains to be seen. In some scenarios, a director for hire can work out well if the screenplay is solid, if the producers and the studio have a clear vision in mind, and then the right director comes along who shares that vision, it can work. But a director is an incredibly important part of the production team, an essential voice and leader in the movie making process, not just during filming, but through the entire run of production. Studios sometimes forget this. Sometimes it just isn't the way it works out, of course, but most directors aren't fond of jumping onto something late in the game, and at this point in time, that's what's gonna happen. And again, that could work, but none of this is inspiring much confidence right now. A director likes to put their stamp on a project. Not enough time to work with new ideas means the production is not in the development phase anymore, and it most certainly is in pre-production. I don't know about you, but I'm getting a bad feeling about a lot of this. It's beginning to sound like a rush job. A director for hire gig doesn't seem right for Jurassic, but then if the studio and the producers are trying to mix things up, then maybe this is what is needed to get the right screenplay and story off the ground. Another inside report that just dropped has told us even more information, providing further context on the exit of David Leitch and his team. Jeff Schneider's exclusive report, The Real Reason Why David Leitch's Jurassic World Fell Apart, actually tells us a slightly more boring behind the scenes reason the studio and director parted ways. Jeff states, I'm told that before there was even a deal in place, Kelly McCormick, who is Leitch's producing partner at 87 North, began meddling with the film's budget and fired the film's line producer this week. That line producer has worked with exec producer Steven Spielberg and producer Frank Marshall for a while, and when word got back to the two of them, they were upset, and according to sources, that's when talks turned sour, as the two of them aren't fond of firing old friends. That does not leave a good impression at all. He goes on, I'm told that this is not McCormick's first time making waves, as she is also said to have lobbied against Antoine Fuqua receiving a PGA credit on Bullet Train, which ruffled some feathers. Word is that she's starting to develop a reputation among execs who are growing weary of her meddling ways. Of course, the moral of the story in this, no matter who you are, you don't cross Spielberg and Marshall. Period. So you know what? Maybe this means that after all, it wasn't a creative vision difference. Maybe he was a good fit, but 87 North's sudden domineering over the movie broke down the relationship fast. Maybe it was creative differences and production meddling on various levels that led to the breakdown. We may never know the full extent of what happened, but it certainly is very juicy. It's an interesting insight into the world, but again, it doesn't paint the best picture, does it? It's beginning to seem a little bit scrambled behind the scenes. It's very much sounding like a rush job. The report continues. Meanwhile, I already told you that Universal and Amblin are looking for a shooter given the project's ultra-tight timeline, which lines up with what the Heat Vision newsletter reported today. The trade claims that Leitch felt there wasn't enough time to put his stamp on the film, which is expected to lean into action territory. Of course, Leitch knew he'd be under a time crunch when his talks first leaked, which explains why sources came forward with the real story. While Universal goes way back with Leitch, by contrast, Spielberg and Marshall do not. And while they were fans of his kinetic visual aesthetic, they also weren't about to let him and McCormick call the shots on their baby. They want someone who will, for the most part, do what they're told, color in the lines, and ultimately service their vision. As I explained, I didn't love this hire in the first place. A horror director would make more sense to me if they're looking for someone a bit more gritty than the recent trilogy. Part of me wishes Spielberg would step behind the camera himself for this one, though I imagine that this job is going to go to either a slick, young director, a la Trevorrow, or a name who needs a hit and is willing to rush to make a release date. The report goes on, is much longer than I've read out, and details more about the story, so be sure to check that out over at theinschneider.com. It definitely makes some great points, and of course, we've stated before how a horror director would be a good fit to take the franchise in a different direction. So we definitely agree with that part there. And come on, having Spielberg back, that would be fun. Now, it really isn't sounding too good, but let's look at the positives. And it is indeed the screenplay. While David Koepp certainly doesn't have the best collection of films, he has written some truly great ones, and obviously his work on Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 2, Dinosaurs Are Back, certainly gives me a lot of faith that he's the right man for the job. He's also written some dark and suspenseful films and novels within the last few years, like Cold Storage and Kimmy, that really reflect well on the headspace he might have been in when writing this new Jurassic. I want to see what his attitude is towards Jurassic after all these years, and I'm really curious with what he wants to do, where he thinks the story should go. This news could also suggest that they are confident in Koepp's script and story and may not want too many changes from a director that comes on board. They want his name to be the sole screenplay credit at the end of the movie, so maybe we need to have some faith in that. I don't like that they're rushing it. They need a director now, and they need to start shooting as soon as possible. To begin shooting this summer is the latest really they could do to make that summer 2025 release date, and even then that's still a very big rush. But if the leaked studio exec notes on Dominion's screenplay are to be believed, the studio knew what the issues were long before that movie came out. They knew the screenplay was at fault, and maybe this time, despite dumb movies seemingly still making billies at the box office, the studio are determined to get the screenplay right. And if they think they have, if they think they've done it, and if David Leitch wasn't the right fit, then bring on the person who is. And don't forget, we have a fantastic list of directors who we think could take on the role, and we know you specifically listening out there are thinking about Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. We cover a great list of directors in our shortlist video, so check that out and share with us in the comments who you think could take on the role. So here we are, I guess, not the news we wanted to hear really, is it? It seems like a bit of a rush job this time around. The goal to hit that July 2nd, 2025 release date is worrisome, especially now, but maybe they have it under control. Who knows at this point? Again, David Leitch didn't excite us, but clearly the vision wasn't aligning. That in itself gives me a little bit of hope once again, and now we're intrigued even more about what's going on behind the scenes. Where are they taking this movie? Are they going to Isla Sorna? More importantly, where do you want them to take this movie? Be sure to share your thoughts about that and your pick for director down below in the comments. We look forward to checking those out, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel to be notified about our new videos. If you have subscribed, thank you so much for doing that, and thank you for watching this video. We expect more Jurassic World 4 news in the coming weeks, so stay tuned.